Good morning, welcome to day 11 of our stitch along. Today we'll be stitching a pincushion flower using whipped woven circle, bullion knots and loops, French knots and Heishi beads. So let me first introduce you to Shinju. So as you can see, Shinju comes in beautiful shades of color, and being 100% silk and hand dyed, the dye takes up beautifully on silk. We have some solid colors as well as variegated colors. And when you're stitching with it, it glides effortlessly as you're stitching, and it makes wonderful types of knots like bullion knots and French knots. And it has a really tight twist to it. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about the difference between a Z and an S twist thread. So Shinju is Z twist. Most threads, like pearl cottons, are an S twist. So if you think about it, so an S twist is like this, meaning that it's twisted together in a clockwise direction, whereas a Z twist is twisted together in a counterclockwise direction, and it makes a little different effect when you stitch with them depending on which stitches you're doing. So if I was doing a bullion knot with an S twist and I wrapped clockwise, which I normally do, you're going to get a tighter twisted bullion knot. And if I did it counterclockwise, it sort of unwraps the thread a little bit as you go, so it's a much softer looking stitch. So we talk about going clockwise, it is a more textured stitch. Counterclockwise, it is a it has a softer appearance. So with the Z thread, the opposite applies. So if you go clockwise, you get a softer looking stitch, but if you go counterclockwise, you will get a more textured stitch. So what I noticed with the Shinju is if I don't go counterclockwise, you see the wraps more definitely, whereas if you go clockwise, they blend together a little bit more. I don't think it really matters as much, but just be aware that you get a slightly different appearance, and if you want them to be more defined, then you would do your bullion knots counterclockwise. Okay, so this is our little pincushion flower. So we're going to do quite a few different bullion knots, as well as we're going to attach some Heishi beads for a change. So we're going to use the 10 spoke. So I'm going to mark the center, mark all the 10 spokes at 1.5 inches. So I'll just write that there, 1.5 inches. And then I'm going to turn this halfway between, and I'm going to mark at 3/4 inch. So right in here. So don't forget, again, also to mark the center of it so that you have the center marked as well. So you can see, there's my center point. This is at 3/4 inch, and the other one is at 1.5 inches. So the first thing we're going to do, I used a size 5 House of Embroidery. I made all my 1.5 inch spokes like this. Okay, so I just did all 10 1.5 inch spokes like that. And then I continued with the same thread, and I did a little whipped woven in the center here, like that. And I think I did 4 rounds, and then I finished that thread off. Then I changed to Silk Perle, so a fine silk thread that I use for beading, and I used the 9 short darner, and I came up and couched the rest of these spokes like this. When I got to the top, I picked up a Heishi bead like this. I brought it up through the center, and then I did 4 spokes on each Heishi bead. So I did that on every single one. I couched, picked up a Heishi bead, and then did the 4 spokes. So I'll just do a couple of these so you can see. So I couched and then did a Heishi bead like that. So I completed all of those before I went any further with this. I then got to my 3/4 inch mark here, and a quarter inch above that I did a little bullion knot. So I did bullion knots out of Very Velvet to give it a different texture, and that's what I did there. So there's my little bullion knots with Very Velvet. Then with a size 8 pearl cotton, I did 2 detached chains either side of the bullion knots coming up at my 3/4 inch marking. So then I had those, which would be the little detached chain stitches. So that I did with a size 8 pearl cotton. And then I came back and did a French knot at the top of my bullion knot. So I did a French knot, and I used my silken ivory. So I wanted to pop a color, so I added the yellow right here for the French knots. And then I came back and used my Shinju, and I did bullion loops. So I did them in between my spokes. So I came up here in the center and I did a bullion loop. So I did a bullion loop in each one of these, so there would be 10 of them in total. And on these bullion loops, I casted on 18 cast-ons. And before I went on to the second one, I came up in the center and couched it down so that they all laid nice and flat and evenly in between here. So I ended up with 10 little bullion loops out of the Shinju silk. And that will complete the whole little pincushion flower. So I hope you have fun. I really enjoyed working with the Shinju. It gives a nice bold stitch, and really finished off the center really well. And I'm a lover of Heishi beads. There's lots of fun things to do with them, and this just adds another texture around the outside of the flower. Okay, happy stitching.